Order! Order! You are an incorrigible delinquent at times. Behave yourself, man!
Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, joins me now in what is clearly for him a very big morning, which is why we're doing this somewhat unexpectedly at 7 minutes after 11. And after David Davis commissioned impact assessments into what leaving the European Union might look like, and then claimed that he hadn't commissioned them, and then said he'd published them, and then didn't publish them, and then shared some fairly strange cut-and-paste jobs that appeared to have been culled from a sort of sixth-form symposium, you, Sadiq Khan, determined to commission some assessments of your own, specifically for London or for the whole country?
It's for the whole country, with an emphasis on the key sectors in London and across the country. And you're right to remind us that the government is embarking on the most important negotiations for decades, and the impact will be felt for decades. And so what we did is we commissioned an independent team of economists. These are economists used by the government currently, used by the Bank of England, used by the British Chamber of Commerce. And we said to the economists, look, there are a number of scenarios the government's working on. Stay in the single market, leave the customs union. Stay in the customs union, leave the single market. Stay in both, leave both. Have a transitional deal, don't have a transitional deal. What will be the impact on each of these scenarios on the various sectors across London and the country? So finance and professional services, construction, food and drink manufacturing, hospitality, and various other sectors. And what they've concluded, based upon their expert evidence, is the harder the Brexit deal, the worse it is for jobs, for investment, and for economic output. And I'm hoping that the government takes on board some of these conclusions to try and reach an agreement that leads to more jobs, more investment, and more economic output, rather than one that leads to fewer jobs, less investment, and less economic output.
Obviously, you're going to be exposed to accusations of resurrecting Project Fear, of revivifying the scaremongering that politicians such as George Osborne are still getting hauled over the calls for doing, against a backdrop of politicians like Suella Fernandes saying 6 months ago in public on Question Time that there'd be no bill payable to the EU, and now she's been promoted into ministerial office. So you know that the narrative, the national narrative, will be very sceptical about the conclusions of this research.
Well, I was, during the course of the referendum campaign, extremely critical about Project Fair on both sides. I think the way to encourage people to vote for you is not to scare them to death. And so this is not about Project Fair. This is about me. This is about me realising that the world we live in is one where the government is in the process in real time of negotiating our exit from the EU. So I'm not saying remain in the EU. What I'm saying is that these experts have looked at 5 scenarios.
Yes.
And what the government should do is negotiate, bearing in mind the destination should be the one that leads to more jobs, more investment and more trade. But also the bad news, just so you know for your listeners, across the country, but also in London, is whereas there is some silver lining, here in London, we are less exposed because we have a higher concentration of high-value jobs. We're more resilient and we can bounce back. This one, I'm afraid, leads to wider inequalities between London and the rest of the country rather than narrower. So those people around the country who voted to leave the EU because they were worried about being left behind, actually, if the government takes the wrong course, there'll be greater inequality rather than less.
Do any of these scenarios paint a picture of an economy that would be healthier than the one within the European Union?
Well, they've worked on the basis that we are leaving the EU, so it's just worth starting at the outset. And based upon us leaving the EU, the best case scenario is us having a 2-year transitional deal and then staying in the single market, staying in the customs union. The worst scenario for businesses, for jobs, for living standards is us having no transitional deal, leaving the customs union and leaving the single market. And it affects all sectors, from financial services to construction, from food and drink manufacturing to hospitality.
The £50 billion figure applies to that no deal scenario. The independent economic analysis suggests that could be what the UK economy loses, on top, of course, of all the payments and responsibilities that the government has to meet. Is there a number, forgive me for not having read every line of it, Sadiq Khan, is there a number on the economic impact of staying in the best case scenario, or the least bad scenario, is staying in the single market and the customs union. What number is applied to that?
So the job losses are less. The trade is less. Well, the figure we've got for the UK wide is worst case scenario £500 billion, best case scenario approaching £100 billion UK wide. For London, you factor it down because London doesn't suffer as bad as the rest of the country.
Sadiq Khan, Mayor of London, many thanks indeed. I don't know anymore with Brexit whether or not that will just get filed under. Yes, of course they would say that, wouldn't they? Because people on the Leave side of the argument presume that everybody on the Remain side is the same as them, and a little bit myopic and sort of determined to see what they want to see. I don't know of any meaningful economic analysis that has arrived at any different conclusions. And part of the reason why the Leave side continues to get away with this bizarre duality almost, is this alternative reality, could not really be better illustrated than with this clip from just 6 months ago of the newly elevated minister within the department for exiting the European Union.
You're absolutely right, and this figure of 50 billion doesn't have any legal basis whatsoever. It's been manufactured, and it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill for £50 billion. It's part of Project Fear. Health warning, don't believe it. You know, we pay into the European Investment Bank, and so actually we're going to get a windfall from leaving. So I think that the scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. We have a lot to gain. Our best days lie ahead, and we're going to be enjoying the freedoms and enjoying the benefits that we gain from leaving.
You'd probably clap her if you were there and you liked what she was saying. It's now been proven to be absolutely wrong on every imaginable level, under any imaginable interpretation. We won't have to pay. Figure at the moment is around £39 billion, but everyone informed expects it to end up considerably higher than that. She was arguing that we'd somehow turn a profit on this process, and she has been promoted. And this really is the very distillation of where British politics is at the moment. I suggested to you the other day that we were moving into an era which, I mean, I'm 46 on Saturday, I'm only a kid. My political consciousness doesn't really stretch much beyond Margaret Thatcher. I vaguely remember Jim Callaghan, but not in any informed sense. But in my living memory, you've always been able to analyse politics. You've always been able to run a slide rule over it. You've always been able to, at least in some sense, whether you agreed with them or not, you've been able to recognise some form of objective truth. But we now live in a world where somebody can say something demonstrably untrue and 6 months later get promoted. Why? Well, the only theory I've got, and we will listen to it again just to be sure we're not misrepresenting Suella Fernandes, the newly elevated minister for leaving the European Union, whose understanding of what leaving the European Union means could not be more ignorant than expressed in that clip I just played you. I have a theory. You know, my first theory of Brexit in 2018 is that there is a significant swathe of people who are so persuaded that the European Union is bad and evil and wrong that they don't care what it's replaced with. I think this maybe is something missed by Sadiq Khan's analysis, or at least by a lot of people waving the analysis around as evidence of something or other. The bottom line here is pretty straightforward. They don't care what it's replaced with. They are going to take their Ford Cortina to the scrap yard without knowing whether or not or what car they're going to get next. They just hate their Ford Cortina so much, and you might think it's a Reliant Robin or you might think it's a Rolls Royce. That's why I've gone for Ford Cortina. That and a little nod towards my vintage. So they're taking their Ford Cortina to the scrapyard, and people like me think that's insane. Take it to the scrapyard when you know what you're going to get to replace it with. But I'm not going to insult you anymore if you're one of those people who doesn't care what you replace it with. It's taken me an awfully long time to, and I hope you don't feel insulted by this description of your position. If you do, then deal with it. Because that is it. That's the only possible explanation for why somebody would get rid of one mode of living, doing business, and not know what it's going to be replaced with, but still be in favour of getting rid of the old one. You're taking your car to the scrapyard without knowing what car you're going to get. Now, here is a woman who has told you that when you take your car to the scrapyard, you're going to get given a cheque. You're definitely not going to have to pay. This is a woman saying the car is going to the scrapyard and we will be better off. All of these people telling you that you're going to have to pay the scrapyard to trash your car and thrash out whatever the replacement was. We will get a dividend, she is saying. And she has been promoted. I'll play it to you again after the break, because there is no better example in these early days of 2018 of just how mad we've allowed things to become. Politician displays on Question Time abject ignorance of the process of leaving the European Union, the simple question of financial responsibility, the posited figure of £50 billion, dismisses all of that as wrong and scaremongering and inaccurate, gets proved absolutely wrong by events, which most people invested in this issue could have told her at the time, but she would have called it scaremongering and Project Fear. She has been proved completely and utterly wrong. Her understanding of the European Union has been exposed as, at the very, very best, profoundly ignorant. At the worst, deliberately deceptive for ideological reasons, but we won't tar her with that brush. Profoundly ignorant, almost spectacularly stupid in her understanding of what this process will involve. And what happens to her 6 months later? She gets appointed a minister in the Department for Leaving the European Union. So here is your starter for 10, my friends. Why? Because Theresa May is still in thrall to the people who can't tell you why they want this to happen, but will scream until their eyeballs pop out of their heads about how much they want it to happen. And people like Suella Fernandes make noises that those people want to hear. So it's not really just the case of the hecklers having arrived on the stage. They're now inviting the audience up on there as well, in the hope that somebody, somewhere, at some point will say something substantive and demonstrably true. Until then, people like her can talk nonsense to the British public and get promoted. What are we going to do? 22 minutes after 11 is the time. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I don't think we will do a phone-in about Brexit today, actually. We should probably spare ourselves occasionally. I will remind you once again of what the newly appointed Minister for Leaving the European Union said about that bill prior to that bill being agreed. And you will understand, I desperately try to find ways to build bridges between these two halves of the population, but I hope that little insight I provided you with before the break is helpful in that process. I get it, that you don't care what it's replaced by, you just want rid of what we've currently got. I believe, for reasons built almost entirely upon lies and exaggerations, I also believe that you would take that as an insult, which is fine. You'll know that I've spent much of the last few years speaking to people convinced when they ring in that they've got very good reasons for supporting this process, and I can't think of any occasion when those reasons have still been in situ at the end of the call to the programme. I could be wrong on that, and I'm sure you'll remind me of an occasion when I was, but just on this issue of Brexit, I'm pretty sure that when people ring in to tell me that they don't want to be ruled by Brussels, or that they believe that we can't control or couldn't control our borders more, or that there is some sort of argument to claim that we're not sovereign as a parliament, but we will be in the... All of these arguments have fallen apart. And I've sat here thinking, well, that surely is going to see a significant... Not this programme, but just the national reflection of what's happened on this programme, surely is going to see some sort of sea change among the British public, and I've struggled to understand why it hasn't, why the dial has barely shifted at all. I get it now. It is simply the case. You don't care. So it was even illustrative. We should all have woken up a little more when that polling came out showing the astonishing number of people who said they wouldn't care if they or a family member lost their job as long as Brexit went ahead. And you sit there, I suspect, if you are anything like me, you sit there and you just presume something's gone wrong with the polling. No, not anymore. It is, and we should have spotted this. The things that we used to laugh at, and hopefully before our children are pensioners, we'll have created a country where we can, or recreate a country where it will once again be something to laugh at. People who write about the EU SSR while unwittingly spreading propaganda and doing the bidding of the actual Kremlin. So there was this sense that it was something evil. Tony Blair put it best. When he was speaking to the European Parliament a few years ago, he said, we're not fighting each other anymore. speaking to the kind of UKIP contingent, we're not fighting with each other anymore. We're trying to find a way to build a better world together. But Britain has belched backwards into a worldview that thinks these people are our enemies. And that's the point I've missed, is that you do think they're our enemies. And you can say, oh, I love Europe, but I hate the EU, which is fine. It's bogus and meaningless, fatuous, desperate attempt to sort of put a fig leaf over your xenophobia. But it's not true, because they are seeking to create a homogenous, unified unit covering the economy and other areas of shared life, and we hate it, or you hate it. And how can I prove that this is completely bonkers? Very simply by the fact that this woman said this 6 months ago and got promoted this week.
You're absolutely right. And this figure of 50 billion doesn't have any legal basis whatsoever. It's been manufactured. And it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill for £50 billion. It's part of Project Fear. Health warning, don't believe it. You know, we pay into the European Investment Bank, and so actually we're going to get a windfall from leaving. So I think that the scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. We have a lot to gain. Our best days lie ahead, and we're going to be enjoying the freedoms and enjoying the benefits that we gain from leaving.
Oh, go on then. We will take a few calls on this. How can anybody... Can you explain to me why she has been promoted, OK? Regardless of where you stand on the Brexit position, my argument is that she is saying things that people who are wrong want to hear. And Theresa May is still in thrall to people who are demonstrably wrong. But that's probably me hearing what I want to hear. You tell me whether you're a fully paid-up passenger on the Brexit bandwagon or whether you are persuaded that it is at the end of the world as we know it. I just sort of typify the two extremes. How can you be so wrong about something and then get a job in the department in charge of it? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I think it's important. I was tempted to look away, but we can talk about smacking on any day of the week, any week of the year. This is crucial and urgent. She has been promoted within the Department for Leaving the European Union, and she displayed in public on BBC One 6 months ago an abject failure to appreciate or understand any of the realities of the process of leaving the European Union. It would be a bit like... who's had a real nightmare at football recently? I don't know. It'd be a bit like somebody getting sacked from managing Stoke City and then getting the England job. Actually, no, football's a bad analogy because that's probably plausible in the context of British football. English football, certainly. It would be a bit like Gerard Ratner saying what he said about his own products. You remember that, when he used the soft C word to describe his own and his business? He was a jeweller. Younger viewers may need to Google this. It'd be a bit like Gerard Ratner saying that about his own goods, watching his own company go down the pan, and then getting a gig at Tiffany's as chief executive. You can stand up in public now in Britain and say stuff that 6 months later makes you look really, really stupid, and instead of your Prime Minister turning around and saying, stop being so stupid, she promotes you. Yeah, let's do that. Just tell me why. Why? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. Why can somebody speak absolute bobbins about Brexit and 6 months later get a promotion into a ministerial role within the department in charge of Brexit? And if you can work that out, you can do my next lot of holiday cover. 0345... It's a joke, it's not up to me. Obviously. 0345 6060 973 is the number you need. Give me a call now. We'll just do it for half an hour, and then we'll all have a laugh with Mystery Hour. So, why? How has she got this job? OK? I mean, I know some people are claiming she wants more diversity in her cabinet, but there are plenty of women and people of colour in the Conservative Party who haven't publicly made idiots of themselves with regard to Brexit. So the question is not why has she appointed a woman, why has she appointed a brown person. The question is why has she promoted somebody who made a complete idiot of themselves about Brexit? 0345 6060 973. And if you can answer that in the words of the great Les Dennis, I'll give you the money myself. A simple question about Brexit Britain. Here is the newly installed Minister for Departing the European Union speaking 6 months ago.
You're absolutely right. And this figure of 50 billion doesn't have any legal basis whatsoever. It's been manufactured. And it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill for £50 billion. It's part of Project Fear. health warning, don't believe it. We pay into the European Investment Bank, and so actually we're going to get a windfall from leaving. So I think that the scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. We have a lot to gain. Our best days lie ahead, and we're going to be enjoying the freedoms and enjoying the benefits that we gain from leaving.
So, to focus on that sentence, the scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. It has now been agreed that we'll pay just shy of £40 billion. So it wasn't scaremongering. She has a point on the legal basis, in the same sense that I can't think of a meaningful analogy, but we could, I suppose, have just refused to pay, but that would have been akin to cutting off both our feet as opposed to just cutting off one of them. So the line we focus on, scaremongering about having to pay to leave, is just not true. So don't believe it. It's now been proven to be true. We are paying to leave. How come she got promoted? And I'll take any answer you've got, and I may try not even to argue on this one, because I just want to know what your understanding of how someone can say in public, it's just not true, we won't have to pay to leave, we are paying to leave, she got a promotion. Michael's in Hampstead. Michael, how do you make sense of this?
Hi. I think it's perfectly clear. We are not paying anything that we weren't already committed to paying.
But she said we wouldn't have to pay that.
No, she said we wouldn't have to pay to leave, and we're not paying to leave. These are sums which, or in fact, much greater sums than we would have been paying had we remained members.
No, let's listen again. Let's just listen again.
Hold on a second.
No, let's be clear that we're both talking about the same thing, Michael.
No, let's.
All right, let's not listen to what she said. Let's listen to what you want us to think she said, then.
No.
Well, let's listen to what she said, then.
You've played it 3 times already, so I don't need to.
Well, she said scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. Don't believe it. She said we won't have to pay.
It is not paying to leave.
So the bill that we're paying isn't the bill she was talking about?
No, it's not.
Oh, okay.
Because we're not paying anything we weren't already obliged to pay. If we remained members of the EU, we would have had to pay these sums plus vastly greater sums. And the fact is that Remainers like yourself just want us to believe that these are sums which would somehow or other have gone away if we'd stayed members of the EU.
I'm not making any position myself. Let's listen again to what she said. No, we're just going to. And then we'll have a look at it through the lens of you suggesting that when she talked about the bill that we are paying, she wasn't, when she talked about the bill that we wouldn't pay, talking about the bill that we've now agreed we will pay. We'll just check together. OK? Let's go.
You're absolutely right, and this figure of 50 billion doesn't have any legal basis whatsoever. It's been manufactured, and it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill for £50 billion. It's part of Project Fear. Health warning, don't believe it. We pay into the European Investment Bank, and so actually we're going to get a windfall from leaving. So I think that the scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. We have a lot to gain. Our best days lie ahead, and we're going to be enjoying the freedoms and enjoying the benefits that we gain from leaving.
So it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill, and scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. And I promise I'm trying to understand you properly, Michael. You're suggesting that she's not talking about the bill that we are paying. She was talking about another bill that we might have had to pay but now won't and never would.
Indeed.
OK, no, that's definitely a view. It's 11:39. Hayden is in Catford. If you agree with Michael, I'd love to hear from you. She wasn't talking about the... Well, hang on, Michael, come back a minute. What was she talking about?
No, hold on a second. You're claiming to be impartial.
Well, you just called me a Remainer. You can't call me impartial and a Remainer in the course of the same phone call, unless we've left logic at the door.
I didn't call you impartial. I said you're claiming to try to be impartial.
No, I'm not.
Indeed, earlier on in the day...
No, I'm not.
She said, I'm doing my very best to be impartial.
Yes, we were talking about homosexuality and religion.
No, we were talking about...
Oh, mate, look, let's talk about you, OK? And your belief that Suella Fernandes was not talking about the EU departure bill when she appeared on Question Time and answered a question about the EU departure bill. Just talk me through your logic.
You are claiming to be impartial.
Oh, mate.
But in fact...
Here we go.
You continuously play things which are prejudicial on one side. You're not playing anything on the other side.
What would you like me to play? Misty?
No, I'd like you to be sensible.
What would you like me to play? I'll play it now. And then you can answer my question.
Okay. Michael Gove, talking about Brexit.
Okay, Michael Gove talking about the Brexit bill.
Hold on a second.
Which clip? Which bit?
How about Jeremy Corbyn expressing an opinion as to whether he wants to stay in the European Union or whether he wants to leave the European Union?
Okay, I'll dig that out and then I'll play it later, and then you tell me what it is, what bill she was talking about when she said scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true, and she also said it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill. So what is the bill that she was talking about?
You were claiming...
Oh, Michael.
You were claiming... No, hold on a second. You were claiming that everybody who voted Brexit didn't care about what happens in the future. Now, the basis of that is we don't know what's going to happen in the future. But if we had voted...
But we know what happened in the past. We know what happened in the past, and she spoke about a bill. What bill was she talking about, Michael?
No, you're not listening to me. We would not know what would have happened if we had remained in the European Union.
No, that's true. Say more stuff, and then I'll ask you the question again.
We're seeing ever closer union, which is what they want. Yep. We're seeing talk of a European army. We're talking about common defence policy.
Yep.
We're talking about bank harmonisation, tax harmonisation.
Yeah, except we're not.
All these things.
We're talking about Suella Fernandes, and your contention that the bill she was talking about 6 months ago is demonstrably and substantively different from the bill the government has agreed to pay. So what bill was she talking about, Michael?
She was talking about a bill to pay to leave the European Union. These are...
Well, hang on, you said a minute ago she wasn't.
No, she talked about a bill to leave the European Union.
It doesn't seem likely that there will be any such bill.
We are not paying anything which the United Kingdom was not already obliged to pay.
It doesn't seem likely that there will be any such bill. She categorically said we weren't obliged to pay anything. You know this is true. This is a stupid argument, Michael. You can disagree about lots of other stuff, but we both know that she was talking about the bill that we're paying.
You agreed with her that there was no legal basis. It's a totally political sanction.
Which is why we're looking at... It doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill. So what is the bill she was talking about if it's not the one we've agreed to pay?
Well, we're talking about the ones where there is a legal basis. We have entered into commitments with the European Union to pay certain sums over future years, and these are the sums of money which we're now...
So scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. Is that statement true or false?
It's true.
So she was wrong when she said it?
No.
We're not paying to leave?
We're not paying to leave. We're paying to meet our legal obligations.
As a precursor to what?
As a precursor to nothing.
As a precursor to nothing? So why are we paying to meet our legal obligations?
Well, you're not paying to meet your legal obligations.
These are your words. I can't do this anymore. I literally just repeated your own words to you.
You didn't. You have legal obligations, and when you have legal obligations, you have to meet them.
Right.
And that's what we're doing. We're not paying anything extra to leave the European Union.
Let's listen to it again, just so that everybody else listening to the programme can be clear that you are clear. You don't have to listen. You don't have to listen. Seriously, you can head back off to the unicorn farm. But everybody else likes to know rather than just believe.
You're absolutely right. And this figure of 50 billion doesn't have any legal basis whatsoever. It's been manufactured. And it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill for £50 billion. It's part of Project Fear. Health warning, don't believe it. We pay into the European Investment Bank, and so actually we're going to get a windfall from leaving. So I think that the scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. We have a lot to gain. Our best days lie ahead, and we're going to be enjoying the freedoms and enjoying the benefits that we gain from leaving.
Right, so, are you still there?
Good. Yes, I am still here.
What is she talking about? Where is this 50 billion figure? Where did it come from?
Oh, because the Cameron government didn't tell us about it.
Oh, Lord.
Did they?
No, on Question Time 6 months ago, when she talked about the £50 billion figure and said we wouldn't have to pay it, what figure was she talking about?
Do you live on a unicorn farm? Because you just told me that I live on a unicorn farm.
So where did that £50 billion come from?
Are you a good quality journalist or not? Do you believe in calling your callers in by name?
Well, I respond to evidence and arrive at conclusions. You're more than welcome to disprove Michael. £50 billion. What figure is she talking about?
You believe in a unicorn farm.
I do believe in unicorn farms. I believe in unicorn farms. There, it's given. So there we go. We're fine. You can insult me. I'll insult you. Everything's cool. Now we're back to the substantive question in hand.
You. I'm just repeating what you said. You believe in unicorn farms, and you believe that I live on one.
£50 billion. What figure is she talking about?
I have told you several times. You're not prepared.
No. What is she talking about? When she said the £50 billion figure, what was she talking about?
A bill to leave the European Union. Which
It's 11:45. The text coming in. I'll read this one out though, because I think it highlights something. God knows what. Typical example of how Remainers refuse to see the other side. The last caller was absolutely correct, but was made to look ridiculous by James's usual patronising ways. Suella Fernandes talks about us not having to pay a bill to leave the EU. Describes it as a part of Project Fear. 4 or 5 months later, the government agrees that we are going to pay tens of billions of pounds to leave the EU. I ask how on earth she can then get promoted, having displayed such abject ignorance of the most simple to understand precursors of the leaving process. Caller rings in. No beef with Michael. I know he went away unhappy, and that doesn't please me. It's horrible to hear decent, intelligent, educated people fall apart in public quite so spectacularly. It's truly horrible. I take no schadenfreude out of it at all. But Michael's contention was she wasn't talking about the bill. When she said we wouldn't have to pay a bill, she wasn't talking about the bill we're going to pay. She was talking about a different bill that no one else has ever mentioned or referred to. But you're so deeply entrenched now in, and we all are, I suppose, except that on one side we're waving flags covered in statistics and facts, and on the other side you're waving blue passports. Here you go. You can listen to that and conclude that the last caller was absolutely correct, but made to look ridiculous because me. How? I played the tape 3 times. Here is a woman palpably wrong, and she got promoted. And my question is why? Joe Johnson has been demoted. Toby Young, it's emerged since we last spoke, attended a very grisly conference that sort of unfolds in borderline secrecy at a London university, attended by people who encourage paedophilia and a belief in eugenics. And that he got a phone call about that the night before he resigned from the London Student newspaper. A lot of the best journalism in this country is being done in the strangest of places at the moment because the rest of us are so enthralled to our bosses. Newspapers I'm referring to. So I just played 3 times a British politician saying we wouldn't have to pay a bill. We're paying a bill. And a nice fellow like Michael can be so corrupted now, intellectually and politically, by the Brexit process, that he phones a radio station with 1 million people listening every week and tries to argue that the bill she was talking about isn't the bill that we're paying. And I love him. I want to put my arms around him and just say, why are we doing this, mate, to each other? Why are we doing this to our country? Here is someone who you thought was on your team saying stuff you really liked hearing and that you really applauded and cheered. Here she is on Question Time saying anyone saying we're going to have to pay a bill is bogus and Project Fear. And there's people like me, these annoying idiots who call you unicorn farmers on the other side saying, no, we are. Of course we're going to have to pay a bill. You can't just walk away without paying a bill. Of course we're going to have to pay a bill. She's wrong. And now we're paying the bill. But she's still right, because there's a different bill that no one ever said we were going to have to pay, but that's what she was actually talking about, even though the question was specifically about how much we'd have to pay. I mean, it's part of the negotiating process as well. This was laid out in the 3 precepts before negotiations could begin. We will agree the settlement bill. But Michael thinks she was talking about a different bill from the one that was part of the negotiating process. It was a bill separate from the negotiating process. And you can tell from my voice that as I highlight these objective facts, these irrefutable statements of what happened, what she said, what she did, it saps my will to live almost, to recognise that some people who listen to this programme every day, often in a state of permanent fury, are getting even more angry the more right we're proved. So now you can go on Question Time, you can describe the bill as a lie, as unnecessary, as scaremongering, you can be proved categorically wrong within weeks, and you can get promoted within the Department for Leaving the European Union. Why? How? Justify it. Riddle it. Explain it. Brian's in Borehamwood. Brian, what would you like to say?
I'd like to say it doesn't matter what she said 6 months ago or a year ago, or it doesn't matter what she says now. All that matters is she's a Brexiteer. The government want Brexiteers in certain roles in order to promote Brexit and to make sure that no one starts arguing against Brexit. So she fulfills that qualification, and that's why she got the job.
And I'm not fond of retrospectively reviewing calls to the programme, although I do it shamefully often. Somebody like Michael, then, is just incapable of recognising that and has to conjure up a weird theory that allows him to continue to believe that she's not talking utter hogwash.
Well, I think he absolutely believes what he says, and he absolutely...
Well, he believes there's another bill that no one ever mentioned, but that's what Suella Fernandes was talking about.
In which case the bill, the combined bill would then have ended up 90 billion by his reckoning.
Oh, that's true, yeah.
There had been a 50. So
the secret bill and the bill that's in the negotiations that everyone is talking about. I mean, for anyone just tuning in.
No. In his mind, there were two very public bills. There was the bill they were talking about, that she was talking about, and then there's the bill now. And those are two absolutely separate bills. It's a bit like saying that no jobs will be lost because of Brexit. But the jobs being lost are not the jobs that won't be lost, because those were different jobs.
Yeah. What?
It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter. She's a Brexiteer.
So facts are dead.
Matters. If they put someone who was a staunch Remainer in that position,
yes,
then that person might go in and calculate, okay, how much is it going to cost if we have a no-deal Brexit? What's the consequence of a no-deal Brexit? And come to a conclusion that says, actually, that's a really, really bad thing. Maybe we should not try to have a no-deal Brexit.
But how do you...
What the government wants.
So she gets the job because she is going to say what people like Michael want to hear. And then I get it doubly confused, because she's lied to people like Michael and made them look a little bit silly, and yet he doubles down on his... And a lot of people do. It's a little unfair to use him as an example. But that's where we are, isn't it?
But in that universe with unicorns and everything else, she hasn't lied. She didn't say anything that wasn't true. She said there would be no 50 billion bill, and she was right on that. There's no 50 billion bill. There's a 40 billion bill, but the 40 billion is not the 50 billion.
No, but that's not what Michael was arguing, that there was a different bill. And she did go further. She said scaremongering about having to pay to leave, i.e. to pay anything, is just not true. And she said it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill, i.e. the existence of the bill was called into question, not the total on the bill. You know that, and I know that.
Yeah, but at the same time, the bill to leave is not the bill we're looking at. We're looking at the bill to not quite leave and stay a bit longer.
But it's the bill that was part of the negotiating process, the bill that had to be agreed before we could move on to a trade deal.
Yes and no.
No, yes and yes, my friend. Yes and yes.
In their minds, the bill...
No, it's written down. They were the three things we had to agree on Ireland. We had to agree on the bill before we could move on to the trade. Everyone knew that, and yet apparently there was another bill.
There was a different bill in their minds. In their minds, the 50 billion bill was taken off the table, then they put a 40 billion bill on the table, and that's a different bill. You've got bill and you've got bill, and you can't...
Where's Ben?
You can't say bill is bill.
No, different bills. Alternative bills. That's what it is. Hashtag Kellyanne Conway.
Yeah, absolutely.
So we weren't talking about that. These are not the bills you're looking for, to paraphrase Ben Kenobi.
Yeah, exactly. It's not the bill they're looking for. That's not the bill. They're talking about a different bill. No one else knows what bill they're talking about, but that's the bill they're talking about.
And now we're condescending and sneering.
I know. And it's sad.
Sad?
All in all, it's sad.
Beyond sad.
All in all, there's a massive bill to be paid. Not that bill, but the other bill.
The other bill, not the bill that we were talking about on Question Time, but the bill that we weren't talking about on Question Time, which she was secretly alluding to, like an Illuminati.
Exactly. It's like the jobs that are being lost are not the jobs that Remainer said that would be lost. Those were different jobs.
Shall we play it again and then do Mystery Hour? Brian.
Go for it.
Yeah, once more, with feeling.
You're absolutely right. And this figure of 50 billion doesn't have any legal basis whatsoever. It's been manufactured. And it doesn't seem likely that there will be such a bill for £50 billion. It's part of Project Fear. health warning, don't believe it. You know, we pay into the European Investment Bank, and so actually we're going to get a windfall from leaving. So I think that the scaremongering about having to pay to leave is just not true. We have a lot to gain. Our best days lie ahead, and we're going to be enjoying the freedoms and enjoying the benefits that we gain from leaving.
So if you want to get promoted within Theresa May's government, I suggest, if you are a currently low-profile Conservative MP, that you should appear on Question Time as soon as possible and promise that everybody is going to get a new car delivered to their front door by close of play next year. Because when it turns out that nobody has had a new car delivered to their front door by close of play next year, you can claim that it was a different car you were talking about and it has actually been delivered, but to a front door that you're not aware you have. And then you wonder why some of us increasingly wonder what the hell is going on. I appreciate you could have heard that and heard something different from what the rest of us heard, but at what point does this castle in the air collapse?